The detention center on Kepler Station hummed with the low frequency of artificial gravity generators, a sound that had become as familiar to Dr. Kira Thorne as her own heartbeat. For 312 days, she had cataloged every vibration, every shift in the station's rhythm, every footstep of her Velian guards. Today, something was different. The door to her cell hissed open with unusual urgency. Instead of the typical duo of armored sentries, a single figure entered, tall, graceful, with the characteristic silver-blue skin and elongated limbs of the Velian species. But this one moved differently, with less of the rigid military bearing Kira had grown accustomed to. "Dr. Thorne," the Velian said, her voice carrying the melodic undertones of her people, though it trembled with something that sounded almost like nervousness. "My name is Lyra. I am your new cultural liaison." Kira looked up from her small desk where she had been sketching star patterns from memory, one of the few activities that kept her sane. The Velian's eyes were different from the others, softer somehow, lacking the cold calculation that seemed bred into the warrior caste. "Cultural liaison?" Kira set down her stylus. "That's a new one. What happened to dangerous species requiring maximum containment?" Lyra's skin shifted to a deeper blue. What Kira had learned was a sign of emotional distress among her captors. "The High Council has reconsidered certain aspects of human interaction protocols. There is growing interest in understanding your species beyond combat capabilities." "You mean they want to know why we're so good at killing things that are supposedly superior to us in every way?" The bluntness of the statement should have offended Lyra, but instead, she did something no Velian had done in Kira's presence for nearly a year. She smiled. Not the predatory expression of a hunter, but something genuine and warm. "Perhaps," Lyra said, moving closer to the energy barrier that separated them. "But I suspect there is more to humanity than warfare. Your art. For instance," she gestured to Kira's sketches. "No other species in the Galactic Consortium creates beauty purely for the sake of beauty. We build, we conquer, we expand, but we do not dream in lines and colors." Kira felt something stir in her chest that she had almost forgotten hope. For the first time since her capture, someone was looking at her as more than a specimen or a threat. "You're different from the others," Kira observed. Lyra's skin flushed to an even deeper shade. "I am curious about humans. Against protocol, I have studied your history, your literature, your music. The way your species faces impossible odds, and somehow finds not just survival, but triumphant, defies everything we understand about natural order. And what do you understand about natural order? That the strong rule the weak. That evolution favors the efficient over the beautiful. That logic supersedes emotion in all meaningful decisions." Lyra paused, her large, dark eyes meeting Kira's. "But humans seem to operate on entirely different principles. You sacrifice for strangers. You fight hopeless battles. You love beyond reason." The word love hung in the recycled air between them, charged with possibilities that both beings recognized as dangerous. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. HFY Chronicle Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. "Tell me about love," Lyra whispered, stepping as close to the barrier as safety protocols allowed. Kira stood, approaching the shimmering energy field that separated them. "It's the reason I'm here. Love for my home, for my people, for the idea that everyone deserves freedom." She pressed her palm against the barrier, watching the energy ripple around her fingers. "What's your reason for being here, Lyra?" "The Velians." Skin shifted through a spectrum of colors Kira had never seen before, finally settling on a soft lavender that seemed to glow from within. "I think," Lyra said quietly, "I am here to learn what it means to choose heart over duty." 3 weeks. passed in a routine that transformed the sterile detention facility into something approaching sanctuary. Each morning, Lyra would arrive with questions that grew progressively more personal, more searching. She brought books from the station's archives, human works that had somehow survived the initial invasion, and listened with rapt attention as Kira explained concepts that seemed to fascinate and perplex her alien mind. "This poet, Maya," Lyra said, holding up a collection of verses. "She writes about pain as if it were a gift. The wound is the place where the light enters you. How can suffering be transformative rather than simply destructive?" Kira leaned back against the wall of her cell, studying Lyra's expression. The Valian had positioned herself as close to the barrier as possible, a habit that had developed over their daily sessions. "Your people don't experience loss the same way, do they? We are taught to accept fate as efficiency in action. When a Valian dies in battle, we celebrate their contribution to genetic optimization. When they fail, we eliminate the weakness." Lyra's skin darkened. "But humans seem to transform loss into strength, weakness into wisdom. It should not be possible." "Maybe that's exactly why it works," Kira suggested. "You're trying to understand us through Valian logic, but we operate on something entirely different. We're not stronger because we're more efficient. We're stronger because we're more stubborn." Lyra laughed, a sound like crystalline wind chimes that filled the small space with unexpected music. "Stubborn, yes, this I have observed. The human colonies that refused evacuation orders even when facing certain destruction. The soldiers who continued fighting long after tactical retreat became the only logical option. We call it hope," Kira said softly. "The completely irrational belief that tomorrow might be better than today, even when all evidence suggests otherwise." "Hope." Lyra repeated the word as if tasting something exotic. "In Valian culture, hope is considered a cognitive disorder, a failure to properly assess probability matrices. And yet here you are, day after day, talking to a prisoner of war about poetry and philosophy instead of extracting military intelligence." The observation hit its mark. Lyra's skin flushed through several colors before settling on the deep blue that Kira had learned indicated emotional conflict. "I have been questioned about my methods. My superiors believe I am being too lenient, too invested in this assignment. Are you?" The simple question hung between them, laden with implications that both understood perfectly. Lyra stood slowly, moving to the small window that looked out onto the vast star field beyond the station. "Every night, I return to my quarters and write reports about human psychology, about the strategic implications of your species' behavioral patterns. But I find myself writing about other things as well. About the way you smile when you remember your home planet, about how you sing unconsciously while you work, about the tears you shed for friends you believe are dead." Kira's breath caught. "Lyra." "I am compromised," the Valian continued, not turning from the window. "By every metric my people use to measure professional effectiveness, I have failed completely. I was supposed to remain objective, analytical, detached. Instead, I find myself counting the hours until I can see you again." The admission settled over them like gravity, inescapable and transformative. Kira stood, approaching the barrier until she could see her reflection overlaid on Lyra's profile. "In human culture," Kira said carefully, "that's not called being compromised. That's called caring about someone." Lyra turned then, her eyes wide with something that looked almost like fear. "Your species has a word for everything, don't you? Even for things that should not exist. Especially for things that should not exist. We're very good at making the impossible seem inevitable. Is that what this is? Impossible becoming inevitable?" Kira pressed both palms against the energy barrier, watching the field patterns dance around her fingers. "I think that depends on what this is." Lyra approached until they stood as close as the barrier would allow, her alien features softened by an expression that transcended species boundaries. I think this is the reason the Galactic Consortium will never truly defeat humanity. You make us feel things we were never designed to feel. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? I do not know, Lyra admitted. But I know that I no longer care about the answer. The alarm klaxons began wailing at 0400 hours station. Time, their harsh red light strobing through the detention level corridors. Kira jerked awake from dreams filled with silver blue skin and melodic laughter, immediately alert as heavy footsteps thundered past her cell. Lyra appeared 30 minutes later, her usual composure shattered. Her skin flickered rapidly between colors: fear white, anger crimson, distress purple, creating a kaleidoscope of emotion across her elegant features. "What's happening?" Kira demanded, rising from her small cot. "They know." Lyra's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried clearly in the confined space. "The surveillance recordings. Our conversations, the way I—" She stopped, pressing her palms against the energy barrier. "Commander Vex has ordered a full investigation into my conduct." Kira's stomach dropped. She had grown comfortable in their daily routine, had allowed herself to forget that every word, every gesture, every shared moment of understanding was being monitored and analyzed by hostile forces. "What will they do to you?" "That is not important." Lyra's skin stabilized into the deep blue of determination. "What matters is what they plan to do to you. The High Council has received reports about human emotional contamination spreading among the occupation forces. There have been other incidents: Valian soldiers refusing orders, questioning the necessity of civilian casualties, even a few cases of active sabotage. Others like you." "Others like us," Lyra corrected, and despite the circumstances, Kira felt a warm surge of belonging at the plural pronoun. "Commander Vex believes that prolonged exposure to human prisoners is creating psychological vulnerabilities in our personnel. The solution is to eliminate the source of contamination." The implication hit Kira like a physical blow. "They're going to execute us." "The human prisoners, yes. But also any Valian personnel deemed compromised." Lyra's hands moved to a small device on her utility belt. "I have perhaps 6 hours before they come for both of us." 6 hours to do what? Instead of answering, Lyra activated the device. The energy barrier flickered and died, leaving nothing but empty air between them for the first time in over 10 months. Kira stepped forward tentatively, then broke into a run, closing the distance between them in 3 quick strides. The first touch was electric, literally and figuratively. Lyra's skin was warmer than expected, with a subtle texture like silk over steel, and when their hands met, Kira felt a slight tingle that might have been residual energy from the barrier, or might have been something far more profound. "Your people really are beautiful," Kira breathed, reaching up to trace the elegant curve of Lyra's cheekbone. "As are yours," Lyra replied, her fingers exploring the rougher texture of human skin with evident fascination. "I have imagined this moment countless times, but reality exceeds all projections." They held each other for long minutes, memorizing textures and temperatures, breathing in the reality of contact after months of separation. But practical concerns soon intruded. "You said 6 hours, Kira murmured against Lyra's shoulder. "What's the plan?" Lyra pulled back, her expression shifting to something fierce and determined. "There are 17 human prisoners on this station. 3 Valian personnel who have been flagged for investigation. The transport ship Meridian docks in 4 hours to take you all to the execution facility on Vega Prime. You want to rescue 20 people from a maximum security station with just the 2 of us?" "Not just us." Lyra smiled, and for the first time, Kira saw something dangerous in that expression. "Did you think you were the only human teaching Valians about the power of hope?" As if summoned by her words, the lights in the corridor began flickering in a specific pattern: 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. The ancient human distress signal, somehow co-opted by alien minds that had learned to think beyond their programming. How many? Kira asked. 47 Valian personnel have reported symptoms of emotional compromise. 12 have actively requested reassignment to avoid further human contact. 6 have been caught providing unauthorized assistance to prisoners. Lyra's skin shifted to the golden hue that Kira had learned indicated fierce pride. Your species is more contagious than any biological weapon. Love usually is, Kira observed, then grabbed Lyra's hand. So what's the plan? We do what humans do best, Lyra replied, leading her toward the corridor. We attempt something completely impossible and make it look inevitable. The service tunnels beneath Kepler Station had not been designed for dramatic escapes, but then again, they had not been designed to contain humans working in cooperation with emotionally compromised Valians either. Kira crawled through the narrow maintenance shaft behind Lyra, marveling at how quickly their desperate plan was coming together. Sector 7, Lyra whispered into her communicator, speaking in rapid Valian that Kira was only beginning to understand. Status report. The response crackled back in accented standard. Engineering secured. Human prisoners released and moving to designated rally point. Sympathetic personnel have created distractions in sectors 2 and 5. Kira felt a surge of something that was part amazement, part vindication. 47, you said. 49. Now, Lyra corrected. 2 more reported emotional compromise during the last shift change. Commander Vex has ordered psychological evaluations for the entire station complement. They emerged from the tunnel into a storage bay where the impossible was already becoming routine. 17 human prisoners stood alongside 23 Valian personnel, all armed with appropriated weapons and wearing expressions of grim determination. The sight should have been terrifying members of 2 species that had been at war for decades, working together with obvious trust and coordination. Instead, it was beautiful. Dr. Thorne, called a familiar voice. Kira turned to see Captain James Reed, the pilot who had been shot down over the mining colony on Tau Ceti 6 months earlier. His arm was in an improvised sling, but his grin was unmistakably human. Good to see you vertical and mobile. Good to see you at all, Jim. I thought you were dead. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated, he replied, then nodded toward a tall Valian male standing nearby. Thanks to Dex here, who pulled me out of the wreckage and has been keeping me patched up ever since. The Valian called Dex displayed the subtle skin shift that Kira had learned indicated embarrassment. The captain required medical attention. Basic humanitarian protocols. Humanitarian, Reed repeated with obvious affection. 6 months ago, he would have said asset preservation. Now he uses words like humanitarian and friendship and worth dying for. As do we all, Lyra said, quietly moving to stand beside Kira. The human concepts of loyalty and sacrifice have proven highly transmissible among our species. An explosion somewhere in the station's upper levels punctuated her words, followed by the sound of emergency klaxons. Through the bay's viewing portal, they could see Valian security forces rushing toward the source of the disturbance. A distraction created by their allies in Sector 5. Transport ship Meridian is docking in 90 minutes, announced a female Valian whom Kira didn't recognize. But security protocols will prevent unauthorized boarding. Unless we convince them we're authorized, Lyra said, producing a datapad from her equipment pouch. I have been working on new transfer orders. Official documentation moving all human prisoners to a different facility. Will it work? Kira asked. It should. Commander Vex expects the transfer. He simply expects it to terminate at an execution facility rather than a rescue rendezvous. Captain Reed stepped forward, his expression serious. And after we're off the station, the consortium will hunt us across the galaxy. They'll never stop looking. Perhaps, Lyra agreed. But they will be looking for isolated groups of refugees. They will not be looking for the beginning of a revolution. The words hung in the recycled air of the storage bay, heavy with implication. Kira felt something shift in the room's atmosphere, hope transforming into determination, desperation. Becoming purpose. Revolution? She asked. There are sympathetic Valians throughout the consortium fleet, Lyra explained. Personnel who have been exposed to human prisoners, who have begun questioning the fundamental assumptions of our culture. The emotional contamination your people represent is spreading faster than the High Council can contain it. Another explosion. Closer this time. Through the viewing portal, they could see the sleek lines of the transport ship Meridian extending its docking tube toward the station. Time to go, Reed announced, checking his appropriated weapon. Whatever happens next, I want everyone to know this has been the most extraordinary partnership of my career. Partnership, repeated the Valian called Dex, his skin shifting to the warm gold of deep satisfaction. Yes, I think this is the correct word for what we have become. Lyra took Kira's hand as they prepared to move toward the docking bay. You ready for this? Once we leave this station, there will be no returning to the way things were. Kira squeezed her fingers, feeling the slight, electric tingle that always accompanied their touch. I was never planning to return to the way things were. The way things were sucked. Lyra's laugh echoed off the storage bay walls as they moved toward their uncertain future. Behind them, the mixed group of humans and Valians followed, carrying hope like a weapon toward the stars. 6 months after the Kepler station breakout, the safe house on the neutral moon of Haven had become something unprecedented in galactic history. A place where humans and Valians worked together not as captors and prisoners, but as equals united. Common cause. Kira stood before a holographic star map, pointing to systems throughout the consortium's territory where rebellion had taken root. Red dots indicated Valian fleet units that had declared independence from High Council authority. Blue dots showed human colonies that had successfully repelled occupation forces. Purple dots, and there were more of these every day, marked locations where mixed human-Valian populations had established free settlements. The Rigel system fell 3 days ago, reported Commander Nash, a former consortium officer whose skin displayed the permanent silver scarring that indicated voluntary neural modification, a process that allowed Valians to experience the full range of human emotions. Admiral Keth declared her entire battle group independent and offered protection to the human mining colonies. That brings our fleet strength to 47 capital ships, Lyra added, consulting her datapad. Plus support vessels and civilian transports. The High Council's response has been predictable. She activated another portion of the hologram, showing the massive military buildup around the consortium's core worlds, thousands of ships, millions of personnel, all dedicated to crushing what the official broadcasts called the emotional plague. They're calling it a disease, Kira observed with bitter amusement. The capacity to care about someone different from yourself is apparently a pathological condition requiring military intervention. From their perspective it is, said Dr. Elena Cross, the human psychologist who had become their unofficial expert on interspecies relations. The entire consortium power structure depends on rigid hierarchies and unquestioning obedience. Empathy is literally incompatible with their system of government. Captain Reed entered the command center, his arm now fully healed thanks to Valian medical technology. Long-range scouts report massive fleet movements. The High Council is consolidating forces for what looks like a final offensive. They're calling it Operation Purification. How long do we have? Lyra asked, though her skin tone suggested she already knew the answer wouldn't be pleasant. 2 weeks, maybe 3. They're bringing everything, the entire first and third battle. Fleets, plus support elements from the reserve commands. This isn't a police action anymore. This is total war. The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. Their growing rebellion, their beautiful experiment in interspecies cooperation, faced extinction at the hands of overwhelming military force. "So we run?" suggested Nash. "Take our people and find somewhere beyond consortium space. And abandon everyone else who's fighting for freedom." Kira shook her head. "That's not who we are anymore." "Then what do you propose?" Dr. Cross asked. "We have 47 ships against several thousand. Even with our tactical advantages, the mathematics are impossible." Kira looked around the room at the faces, human and Valian, that had become her family over the past months. These people had risked everything for the radical idea that different species could not just coexist, but thrive together. They had proven that love was stronger than programming, that hope could overcome genetic imperatives. "We do what humans do best," she said finally, echoing Lyra's words from their escape 6 months earlier. "We make the impossible seem inevitable." She turned to the star map, highlighting communication nodes throughout consortium space. "The High Council thinks this is about military conquest. They're wrong. This is about ideas, and ideas can't be killed with plasma cannons. What are you suggesting?" Lyra asked, though her shifting skin tone indicated she was already beginning to understand. "We broadcast everything. Every testimony from liberated Valians about what it feels like to choose hope over duty. Every recording of human prisoners and their guards working together. Every example of cooperation, sacrifice, and love between our species." Kira's voice grew stronger as the plan crystallized. "We flood their communication networks with proof that another way is possible. The High Council will try to block the transmissions," Nash pointed out. "Let them try. Every act of censorship will prove our point. Every attempt to silence the truth will create more questions." Kira smiled, feeling the familiar surge of hope that had sustained her through 10 months of captivity. "Besides, they can't block personal communications. Every Valian who's experienced emotional awakening has family, friends, colleagues back home." "A propaganda war," Reed said slowly, "but fought with truth instead of lies." "More than that," Lyra added, her skin brightening with excitement. Demonstration that their entire worldview is built on false assumptions. If enough Valians see what we've accomplished here, if they understand that cooperation creates more strength than competition, then Operation Purification becomes Operation Liberation," Kira finished. "Their own forces become our greatest allies." Dr. Cross was already working at her console, pulling up psychological profiles and communication algorithms. It could work. The Valian psyche is highly susceptible to proof-based argument, especially when supported by emotional resonance. If we can create enough cognitive dissonance, we can trigger a cascade effect throughout their entire civilization, Lyra said, moving to stand beside Kira at the star map. "Not rebellion from without, but transformation from within." Kira took her hand, feeling the familiar electric warmth of their connection. Around them, humans and Valians worked together with unconscious ease, the barriers between species dissolved by shared purpose and mutual respect. 2 weeks to change the galaxy," she said quietly. 2 weeks to prove that love really is the most powerful force in the universe, Lyra replied. Outside the command center's windows, the twin suns of Haven painted the sky in colors that had no names in any single language, but could be described perfectly by voices speaking in harmony. Across the vastness of space, the rebellion that had started with 1 human and 1 Valian in a detention cell was about to become something infinitely larger, a transformation that would echo through the stars for generations to come. The impossible was about to become inevitable, 1 heart at a time.